Arizona Roddy here, coming at you with another moto vlog today. Cruising in downtown Phoenix, you know how I do, which is basically what I do every day. But let's get out here and make a vlog. Ooh, schoolgirls. I'm not gonna fucking say nothing about those fucking skirts they give them to wear. Fuck it. Let's get on to today's topic. Today's topic, I want to talk about the history of motorcycles. Ooh, look at that Harley Davidson Road King. Yeah, I want to talk about the history of motorcycles, and because it's interesting to see what motorcycles developed too, from what they're from, how this basically started. If you know anything about old motorcycles, and I'm talking about fucking pre-1900s bikes, like before Harley Davidson or Indian was ever invented, you know, Royal Enfield, none of those very first big names were here. They evolved from bicycles. They were bicycles with tiny little motors on them. And I remember I saw this bike in a museum once. I'm gonna go this way. I saw this bike in a museum once, and it would look like a bicycle with an engine, had no transmission, no clutch. Clutches hadn't even been invented yet. So whenever you had to pull up to a stoplight, well, there was no stoplight. Whenever you had to stop the bike, but you didn't want to just kill the engine, you just stop, and then you just pick up the bike, lift the rear wheel off the ground, because, you know, the rear tire wouldn't stop spinning because there were no clutches invented yet. But I guess, you look at some old-ass bikes, they're just bicycles with little motors that don't even have clutches or nothing. But then we get names like Harley Davidson, Royal Enfield, and Indian coming around. Indian and I think Royal Enfield are both 1901. Royal Enfield might be a little older. Harley Davidson is 1903. And this is back when, baby. And I think the very first Harleys were they were belt driven. They had leather belts on them. Then they switched to chain like 10 years later. But it's funny though, you look at those early Harleys and they look really cool, actually. Not the kind of bike you want to ride around. I don't think these guys only have one gear, the gear, and you put that in gear and you drive away. You got to these things probably take 40 minutes to start, I think, and you get about 3 miles a gallon, or I'm sorry, 3 miles for the entire tank of gas, which is fucking awesome. But yeah, and then you have to pour oil in them. And it's a one-time gig. You put the oil through it, it cycles through the engine, then it shoots out the back. It lubes the chain, and then it drips on the ground. So they called it recycling the oil back in the day, because the oil came from the ground and then it gets dumped back on the ground. So yeah, they weren't efficient machines. And like I said, the three big names there, I think, were obviously Harley Davidson and Indian, and Royal Enfield. I don't know exactly when Royal Enfield went out of business. I imagine that would have probably been at World War II, when Harley started taking over everything. So, but I don't know about that. But yeah, and then they were just bicycles with engines for a while, and then they started to look like, you know, real motorcycles, like, you know, what you would think of as an old motorcycle. They had the badass things like suicide clutches, the butt shifter, which for those of you who don't know is actually a shifting lever that's on the side of the tank right there. I think they had like 3 gears back then. And suicide clutch, what you guys don't know is the clutch is right here on your foot, and then you got a rear brake, and that's it. No front brake, clutch is on the foot. And yeah, no front brake. So the hardest thing about these bikes, if you've ever ridden a chopper that was built this way, I've never ridden one of these old bikes, but I have ridden a chopper that was built this way, is so you pull in the clutch with your foot right down there with your left foot, and you use the rear brake, which is the only brake, with your right foot. What if you're on a hill? You gotta hold in the clutch and the brake at the same time. You gotta sit there and balance the bike, or you can't stop on a hill. Which is absolutely hilarious, that people still build choppers like that. But so that's what those were like. And they had the shifter right here, shift gears right there. These bikes have no rear suspension, and the front suspension is basically not. It's shit. It's crap. It sounds like a lot of fun, doesn't it? It actually does sound like a lot of fun to ride these bikes. But so that's around the 1930s is when I think I'm talking about the bikes. I'm not a fucking historian, so I'm really not the best guy to explain this topic, but I'm just giving the best of my knowledge. Then you start seeing bikes really start evolving in the 1940s and 50s. Now in the 1940s is when bikes have changed forever, because the US Army, they get Indian, they get, well, you know, all the big brands, and there were a few big brands. Harley didn't dominate the market yet. So what was I talking about? Yeah, so the US government comes to all the brands, they say, hey, we need a 300cc bike. This is World War II, not World War I. A 300cc bulletproof bike that would, and we're gonna test them out, see which one's the best, and then we're gonna buy a shit ton of units for the war. And the road's closed up here, so I guess I'm not going this way. So, of course, all the bikes, they bring them out to the military base. All the big manufacturers bring the bikes, except for Harley. I think they brought a 400cc bike, and the US government asked for, I'm sorry, for 300cc bikes. And I love talking about Harley history. Harley has such a really rich history. It's part of the reason I love this brand. But that road's closed too, it looks like. So they all bring, except for Harley, which brings a 400cc bike, and the US government loves it. They buy Harley's bike, and Harley is mass produced for World War II. These bikes would actually eventually turn into what people know as bobbers. Is because after the war, there was all these veterans that won, you know, and the US government had all these bikes, and they were like, hey, you veterans, do you want a free Harley Davidson? So they'd give them the one with the big bullet windshield in the front and all that other shit. And all the guys would eventually say, I don't want my bike to look like everybody else's. So they'd cut the rear fender off, take off all the saddlebags and the big fucking bullet windshield on the front, and it would be called bobbing it. So that's what bobbers were. But so yeah, I mean, Indian completely goes out of business after this, and they come back for a little while now and then, like they're doing now. But Harley dominates the market. I mean, there are no Japanese manufacturers at this time. For the 50s and 60s, Harley is the brand. It is the only motorcycle brand. I mean, there might be one or two more I forget it about, but no Japanese bikes. So, and it wasn't until the 70s that there was a Japanese bike on the market, and the first one was this thing, was a Honda, and this Honda was like it looked like a scooter, and Harley Davidson was just basically like, eh, well, whatever, let them sell their little scooter. We're dominating the market right now. Our bikes are the best. Everyone knows it. So we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing. And all of a sudden, people start buying this Honda scooter because, like, think about this. Back in the 60s and 70s, 50s, anytime, if you rode a motorcycle, one, you rode a Harley Davidson, and then there was one other thing. You were a badass. Let's be honest. Back in those days, only one type of people rode a motorcycle, and you were a badass individual, a badass biker, a big, gruff, bearded, greasy, smoking, tattooed guy. And that was the only people that rode motorcycles. But then when Honda came out with their new little scooter motorcycle, everybody started buying them. So, I'm sorry. But, so, people keep buying these Honda motorcycles, and Harley starts getting the image of, oh, the only bad bikers drive Harleys. You gotta get the Hondas. So Honda starts really taking over, and Harley starts going into a big, how do you say it? Like they're pushing bankruptcy at this point because they are not selling enough brands. And eventually the bowling company was like AMF or something like that, bails them out. But they actually still own, I think, like some percent of Harley. But I think 51% if I'm not mistaken. I don't know about that though. So I'm sorry, where was I? Oh yeah, so this is when Japanese manufacturers start taking over, and the Japanese are dominating the market for the 80s, the 90s, and the late 70s. Well, 90s is when Harley made a comeback, mainly with the Fat Boys, the bike they say let Harley make their comeback. But so Harley makes a comeback, and then now you have what you have today, all these brands. I mean, there's no, I'm not gonna talk about the 2000s or any of that. That's not really history yet. So that's my basic understanding of motorcycles. Just some stories I can give you. But like I was saying, it sounds like a lot of fun to ride one of those old Indians with a suicide clutch, a butt shifter, no front brake, only the rear brake right there. So when you're on a hill, you can't you have to either shut your bike off so you don't have to hold in the clutch, or be some mad skilled fucking balancer, I guess. But hey, that's I mean, motorcycles are pretty interesting because I mean, everything that we have, cars developed first as motorcycles. So look at what's brand new in a car this year, and that's what you'll see in a motorcycle 10 years from now. That's how I mean, I haven't been alive long enough to really see the evolution, but yeah, that's how you could tell. But I mean, motorcycles got a cool history behind them, and there's a lot of other cool things that, you know, I'm not a historian. This is just some knowledge I know about the history of bikes. But yeah, fucking, I wish I had an old fucking vintage bike, a vintage Indian, a vintage panhead, a vintage fly. Hell, I'll even take a 19 fucking whatever iron head, a shovel or something. I really want a vintage bike to just ride around town. Something that's just badass. I don't have 100 grand to spend on an Indian, but hey, I know that what is it called? S&N? Is that it? S&N? They make Harley parts. They actually sell, because they have all the molds for the parts of like the flathead motor, panheads and shit. They actually will sell you a brand new flathead motor if you want to like put it in a chopper or something. That sounds like a lot of fun. But yeah, you could buy I mean, it's not a vintage one, it wasn't made in the 60s or whatever, but you can buy old motors from them because they have the molds. Harley gave them the molds because Harley didn't want them anymore. And since Harley owns part of them now too, yeah, so you can buy one of those motors, and it might be fun to just build myself a chopper someday using an old panhead motor. You know, not an old one, but a new panhead motor, or older, baby. Eh, well, it's just fun to think about this kind of stuff. And you should see the old sport bikes too. They were pretty awesome. Basically, I think they were just Harley motors with a case around them so that they could, the air cooled would work better. You guys see me in that reflection? Look how awesome I am. So yeah, I mean, there was a point in time where when the Japanese started making those like dirt bike looking enduro kind of bikes and those scooters that they start dominating the marketing with, Harley did eventually try to keep up with them, and Harley Davidson made a few two-stroke bikes. They made a few dirt bikes. There are actually Harley Davidson dirt bikes. Now, they're not made by Harley Davidson. They're made by somebody else, and they have the Harley logo slapped on them. But same with sport bikes. There are Harley Davidson sport bikes that exist. It's just, that's pretty awesome. I would fucking love to ride a Harley Davidson dirt bike. But anyway, that's kind of all I got for you guys. I'm gonna head out now, head home, relax, fucking upload this video. Yeah, I'll see y'all later. Peace out.